you, I have a significant foreign policy staff, as you know, that, matter of fact, dozens of them. So I had a long meeting with my former national security advisors, former secretaries of state, et cetera, and getting their read, what they've heard so far. But if it doesn't get cleared up quickly, then I will seek and ask if I can be briefed.
Lastly, have you begun to prepare for debates against President Trump?
I can hardly wait. All right?
Thank you. Over the weekend, Princeton decided to remove Woodrow Wilson's name from their school and buildings due to his racist thinking. President Trump yesterday called that decision incredible stupidity. What do you think about Princeton's decision and the president's comments? And then more broadly, as the nation is in this moment of reckoning when it comes to race, we're seeing the removal of statues. Also the removal of names from institutions and schools. Do you think that this is the right approach to come to terms with our nation's history and its leaders? What do you think when you see the removal of some of these statues?
Well, I think there's sort of three categories on that. One, any institution that chose a name and wants to now jettison that name, that's a decision for them to make, for whatever reason they make it. So I'm assuming the Board of Trustees at Princeton University made the judgment about the Woodrow Wilson School. I don't know, but it was made within the context of an institution that chose that name and now no longer wants to be associated with that name. And I think the president's, secondly, I think there's a distinction between as the former mayor of New Orleans said, the difference between reminders and remembrances of history and recovery from history. And so the idea of comparing whether or not George Washington owned slaves or Thomas Jefferson owned slaves and somebody who was in rebellion, committing treason, running, trying to take down a union to keep slavery, I think there's a distinction there. And so I think the idea of bringing down, I think, all those Confederate monuments to Confederate soldiers and generals, et cetera, who strongly supported secession and the maintenance of slavery and going to war to do it, I think those statues belong in museums. They don't belong in public places. And I think with regard to those statues that are in monuments, like the Jefferson Memorial or whatever, I think there's an obligation that the government protect those monuments because they're different than, that's a remembrance. It is not a dealing with, revering somebody who had that view. They had much broader views. They may have things in their past that are now and then distasteful, but that's a judgment for the country. So, for example, taking down, toppling Christopher Columbus statue or George Washington statue or et cetera, I think that is something that the government has an opportunity and a responsibility to protect from happening.
And on a different subject, you have been doing these public events for the past month, which has put you in contact with more people. Have you been tested for coronavirus? And if so, how frequently are you doing that?
No, I have not been protected. I have not been tested for the coronavirus for two reasons. One, I've had no symptoms, as my mother would say, knock on wood. And number two, I haven't wanted to take anybody else's place in the process. But the Secret Service, they all get tested. They're around my home. And anyone who comes into my home, including staff who comes in, is tested to determine whether they have the virus. I expect what I'm going to do, so it doesn't look like I'm moving in the front of the line here, is be tested relatively soon. My daughter has been tested. She was in Florida she's a social worker working with the Boys and Girls Club. She came home, and before she could come home, she's been tested twice, so to make sure she's clear and quarantined. She lives in Philadelphia, but I haven't yet. I have not been tested yet. Yes. I'm sorry, who was I supposed to go to next? Anybody? I got to make sure I get the Wilmington newspaper here before I leave, or I'll be dead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. It's good to see you, and I know we all hope that you continue to do this through November as often as possible. So,
We will. The more I have an opportunity, I will do it.
two quick questions. One to follow up on Russia. You talked about what our president has done, but yesterday you said at a fundraiser regarding Vladimir Putin, quote, "I'll confront Putin, I'll strengthen NATO, I'll make clear to Putin that he'll have a price to pay for interference in our democratic processes." Specifically, can you tell us what you would do to Putin if this is true, and in general for what's happened in the past?
I can, but I will not, but I will tell him. Here's the deal. The idea that Putin or any other foreign leader can engage in attempting to manipulate a presidential election, the idea that he continues his activities in Central and Eastern Europe that he's doing, the idea that it can be done without any consequences is not going to happen if I'm president of my administration. That ranges from everything to making sure we go to the United Nations Security Council, all the way to imposing sanctions that would be commensurate with the action that he has taken that is inappropriate. But I have